Hey everyone, we'll get started shortly. Just give a few more minutes for everyone to join.
Oh, we have a lot of people already.
All right.
Okay, we'll probably get started, Aisha.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the SEPTA Bus Revolution community webinar. Tonight, meeting will be it's gonna cover proposed route changes in West Philadelphia and Center City. My name is Aisha.
Sorry, it's the Northeast Philadelphia. It's not
Northeast Philadelphia. Sorry, it's
Thank you.
Northeast Philadelphia and Center City. My name is Aisha Hassan, and I'm a civil engineer at Michael Baker International, and we are supporting SEPTA on the bus revolution. We'll start off with a quick introduction before moving into some of the key themes of what we have heard throughout this project so far. Then we are gonna go into specific examples of proposed route changes and provide some information on what to expect over the next year and how you can provide us more feedback. And then finally, we'll wrap up the meeting with a quick Q&A section where we'll answer your questions on the proposed route changes. Before moving into our presentation, we would like to gather some information through polling questions to learn more about who has joined the webinar tonight. As you can see, the most common routes used by bus riders here on this webinar are route number 14, 58, 19, 20, and so on. So I'm gonna pull the first polling question right now. So first, please let us know which part of the SEPTA region do you most often travel to? Well, getting answers.
I think good to close the poll.
Yes. All right. As you can see, Northeast Philly and Center City, we have people traveling more often to here on this webinar. Okay, thanks for answering. I'm gonna pull the second poll. There you go. So what types of bus revolution engagement activities have you participated in so far?
All right, let's, we can close it up.
All right. Looks like bus riders in this group has participated in virtual transit talk and public open houses and as well as through website. Well, welcome to those who are joining for the first time. And our final question. How did you first hear about the bus revolution?
And just another couple seconds.
Okay. Right. Thanks for sharing. It will help us improve our communication for future. Back to our...
All right.
Now I'll
Great.
pass it over to my colleague Bethany.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. My name is Bethany Whitaker. I work for Nelson Nygaard. We are the consultant team that's working with SEPTA on the bus revolution. And I'm going to get us kicked off tonight. The first thing I want to do is just thank everybody for attending tonight. We're really glad that you're here. We're really excited that you want to learn more about the bus revolution. And we just want to also thank everybody who has participated in previous bus revolution events. We released a draft network in the fall, received a lot of feedback on that. We listened to that feedback. We made a lot of adjustments to try to accommodate that feedback and that input. So we're excited to kind of talk to you and make sure that you know that we heard you and that we value your impact and that we are responding to that as well. So here's what we heard. We heard a lot of feedback, a lot of the themes and things that we heard about as part of the fall network that we released was people were frustrated and they didn't really like about the fact that there were more transfers in the network and there were fewer one-seat rides. And a one-seat ride is where you're able to get on the bus on one place and ride it all the way to the end of your trip without having to transfer. There are a lot of transfers in SEPTA's network already. The fall bus revolution draft network added some more transfers there. People didn't like that. That was something that we heard really loud and clear. People were also frustrated and angry about routes being eliminated. They talked to us a lot about concerns about their personal safety and security. There were a lot of questions about how people would get to school. There was also a lot of comments about frequency, weekend service, and the increased simplicity of the network overall. And in fact, some of the things that people said that they liked about the draft network was that increased frequency. And they liked one of the clear strategies of the fall network was to increase the frequency throughout the day and on the weekend days. And right now the network has a lot of frequency, but the frequency is really organized around the weekday peak period. So sort of like 6 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. And what the bus revolution draft network and this updated draft network did and is continuing to do is sort of flatten that frequency and provide it for longer periods of time and on more days of the week. We got a lot of positive feedback for that. And so that is one of the aspects of the draft network that we we retained and we're still taking comments on. The other thing that we really tried to do was make the network simpler. And again, we tried to do that in the fall. We heard a lot of positive feedback about that. That is something that we are trying to carry forward into this network as well, as much as possible. People told us that they liked the simplicity of the network. It was easier to understand. And hopefully easier for them to use. They also talked to us a lot about the fact that we did have more connections in the draft network so that they could get more places further faster. And so those are the kind of things that we really tried to keep with this updated network. The things that people didn't like, I'll just talk about these relatively quickly. I mentioned this already. There were more transfers. People didn't like the fact that there were increased number of transfers. And so we did try to reduce the number of trips that require a transfer, especially between two destinations where there are a lot of people traveling, and also for short trips. And so if there were short, places like Fairmount and University City was one case where we did introduce a transfer there. People were really angry and upset about that. And we took another look at that and we said, okay, that's like a 2-mile trip. If we asked people to transfer, it could double their travel time. So that was a case where we looked and we restored that connection. And there are a handful of those kind of cases throughout the network. We also, in our draft network in the fall, we didn't include a lot of information about the school service, and we did get a lot of questions about that. We got a lot of concern from parents and school-age children about how they were going to get to school. So we did sit down with the school district and we talked about the SEPTA bus routes that connect to the schools, made sure that we had the frequency at the right time. And so you will see in the updated draft network that we did include more of that school service. We had always intended to include it. We just weren't showing it as part of the draft networks, but it did create some concerns from folks. So we did add that back in, and we made sure that the buses service levels are right so that there won't be overcrowding when people are getting to and from school. Another thing that we heard a lot about was safety, especially on the Market Frankford line and the Broad Street line. And so this is something that SEPTA has been hearing a lot from a lot of people. And of course, also every time we go to a community meeting in the fall, and it's still happening with this spring round, people are letting us know that they don't always feel safe. So SEPTA has some programs. They have a SCOPE program that stands, I don't know, Dan, do you know what SCOPE, can you define what SCOPE stands for? I don't know off the top of my head.
It's safety, cleanliness, ownership, partnership, and engagement.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So that program is part of SEPTA's overall efforts to increase cleanliness and safety at its facilities, and also partner with local organizations to also help people that are needing help and hanging out in the stations and could use some help. So they're connecting them with other organizations to work with that. So that is something that we've heard. We're trying to address that. SEPTA is working on that as part of other projects as well. The other thing that we heard a lot about was the route numbering. If you saw the network in the fall, you may remember some 3-digit numbers that we used. People definitely didn't like that. They found that they were confusing. So you will see with this network that we're back to the original numbers. In some cases, we weren't able to, we used the existing bus numbering scheme as much as possible. In some cases where we kind of combine parts of two routes, you'll see like we have a route 8-18 or 20-50, I think it is. You'll see a couple of those bus routes that are in the network. And we will eventually, if we keep those routes, or depending on the final design, we will renumber some of the bus routes, but they will be in SEPTA's existing, they'll be more aligned to the way SEPTA numbers things right now. I'm just thinking about the network overall. Again, part of the bus revolution design is to have bus routes that are simpler, straighter, and more frequent. And so as part of that, the existing SEPTA network has 125 network bus routes. The updated draft network has 110. We also have 8 on-demand zones. So there are a few fewer routes in the network, but there's a lot more frequency. In the existing network, 33 bus routes count as frequent, which means that they arrive at least every 15 minutes. And in the updated network, there's 41 of those routes. We do have the exact same number of service hours. We also have balanced service hours by county. So City of Philadelphia has the same amount of service that it did. That in the proposed network, it has the same amount as in the existing network. And that's true for all the other counties as well. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Dan. But just before I do, you can go ahead and put questions in the Q&A, and so we just got one, for example. We will answer most of them at the end, but somebody just asked about what on-demand routes are, and so I can just take a minute and explain that. And again, Dan, if you want to correct me or update anything I say, go ahead. But an on-demand service is, sometimes we call it microtransit. What it is a service where people can either call request a trip, and SEPTA would make a promise that you'd be picked up within 30 minutes of requesting the trip, sort of like a ride-hailing service like Uber or Lyft, but it would be public transportation. It would be a shared ride service. So they could pick up, Dan, for example, calls and says, hey, I need a ride to, you could only travel within the zone, but he requests the ride, and then I also request a ride. They'll pick up Dan, they'll pick up me, and they'll bring both of us to the Paoli train station, for example, or to the grocery store or whatever, if we're going to the same destination, or they drop him off at the grocery store and they bring me to the train station. So it's kind of like an Uber or Lyft. Travel is constrained within that zone, and you would be able to book it on your phone, on your computer, or by calling a telephone number. The fare would be the same as a SEPTA bus route, and the transfers would also be free. So I hope that answers your question. Looks like it did. So great. Thank you. All right. So now back to you, Dan, or to you.
Thank you. Just one thing to add to the on-demand conversation is that the on-demand zones, we proposed 8 of them within the Bus Revolution network, or the updated draft, and they are mostly in sort of further parts of the region, so parts of the suburbs where fixed route transit, so regular bus routes, are just not working very well. So we don't have any on-demand zones proposed for the city, but we do have some in Lower Bucks County. I would assume some of you do use some of the routes there. You use the city routes to connect to routes in Bucks County. So I just want to clarify that. And now, thanks, Bethany and Aisha. I'm going to go through some of the changes, some of the updated changes in the new draft. As Bethany said, please put any questions you have in the chat. We will get to them sort of towards the end of the presentation. But first, we're going to start with Route 14. Route 14, we do have sort of a 14 and 14A. And if you look at the website, that doesn't mean 2 separate routes. It means 2 patterns on one route, just to clarify. So Route 14 will keep its primary alignment in place, which is Frankfurt Transportation Center to Neshaminy Mall. And then it will have less frequent service that will go from Frankfurt Transportation Center all the way to Oxford Valley Mall. We aren't proposing alignment changes, but we are proposing taking some of the patterns that are on this route off of it. Route 14 is extremely complex. It's got about 30 different service patterns, some of which, contradict each other. So trying to simplify this route. This will provide the local service on Roosevelt Boulevard, which will work in parallel with the direct bus. And like I said, there will be a long line version of this that goes all the way from Frankfurt to Oxford Valley Mall. But the primary pattern, which would be a 30 max route, will run from Frankfurt Transportation Center to Neshaminy Mall. Next slide, please. So proposed Route 58 or 58A and 58A. So you'll remember that in the previous iteration, we had this route not going to Neshaminy Mall, but based on feedback from the last run, we are proposing to retain the pattern to Neshaminy Mall. We are proposing this as a frequent route, so 15 minutes or better on weekdays and weekends, and then hourly service to Neshaminy Mall. The ridership on this route to Neshaminy Mall is quite low, but people did say that it was important to them, so we wanted to retain that. But there are no proposed alignment changes for this route either. So proposed combination of routes 19 and 70. This will go from Tarsdale Regional Rail Station to Fern Rock Transportation Center, traveling via Grand Avenue, Algon, Whitaker, Cottman, Oak Lane, and 5th to Fern Rock. It'll combine parts of Route 19 and Route 70, but it'll send people over to Fern Rock instead of Frankfurt Transportation Center. And then it'll connect with lots of frequent buses, the 66, the 20/50, and the 58. We're proposing to consolidate routes 20 and 50 into one frequent route. So this would be a route that currently neither of these routes are frequent. This would become a frequent route, Philadelphia Mills to Frankfurt Transportation Center. We changed the alignment a little bit after the last draft so that it's serving Modena Park. But ultimately the alignment is similar to what it does currently. It will be a frequent route, 15 minutes every day, all day. The minor alignment change, we use Grant to Ashton to Home instead of Academy to Ashton to Home. So we are simplifying the route, streamlining it a bit. So it only has the one service pattern. But we are looking, but we do think this will be a good frequent route. Next slide, please. Route 25, I just saw a question in the chat, but maybe hopefully this will cover it. We are proposing to consolidate route 73 and 25 into one route, which will become a frequent route. The routes are pretty similar. They operate on many of the same alignments. So we are proposing that the service on route 73 migrate over to route 25, which is a much higher ridership route. It would enable route 25 to run frequently between Frankfurt Transportation Center and Spring Garden. Operating via Aramingo Avenue and Richmond Street. The one alignment change that I do want to note here is that we are proposing in Fishtown to run it along York Street, which is how it's detoured currently, as opposed to on Memphis and Cedar. I know this isn't in the Northeast, but I did want to highlight it here. If you do take this route beyond sort of the Fishtown area, you'll probably have been bogged down on those streets before. So this should allow us to improve the reliability on the route in that segment and the route overall. Next slide, please. We are proposing to combine segments of Route 26 with segments of Route K. This is the eastern portion of Route 26 with a bit of a different alignment, traveling on Bustleton and McGee to Tabor Adams 2nd and then 11th to Fern Rock Transportation Center. This will be a less frequent route, but that's more in line with the demand on the route. And there are connections to frequent bus routes and the L and the Broad Street line. Next slide.
This is the other half of that.
Oh yeah, sorry, thank you. And this is the other half of that route. So if you do take the 26 through Olney, we are propose combining the western part of the 26, which is the higher ridership segment, with the 65. So it would create one longer but much more frequent route between Fern Rock through Olney to 69th Street Transportation Center along the same alignment on City Avenue. Next slide, please. So in terms of the benefits of this network, there is a much greater access to frequent transit, meaning service that's coming every 15 minutes or better. The number of people that are now within a quarter mile of frequent transit goes up 18%, and the number of jobs goes up 17%. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. We're trying to really use frequent service as a way to connect people, get them further faster in the system, so they can do more things using SEPTA. Next slide. There's also, in terms of different populations of people, there's improvements in lower income individuals, minority individuals, people with disabilities, and older adults in terms of access to frequent transit. So again, this just helps people live their lives a little bit easier. It helps them get further faster. We want transit to be a way for people to connect to things, not a barrier. So we are trying to move in this direction. Next slide, please.
All right. You want me to walk through the website?
No, I'll do it, Bethany.
Okay.
Next slide. So, we've been doing engagement now for about a month. We kicked off right at the beginning of April. We've been doing meetings and webinars for the last few weeks. We are doing community meetings. We've also been doing. We bought the project bus back. We have a bus with a project with a bus revolution livery, and we've been bringing it to different transportation centers and talking to people. We'll actually be at Frankfurt tomorrow in the afternoon. So hopefully if you find yourself in Frankfurt between 3 and 6, definitely stop by and introduce yourself and provide feedback, even if you've already done so. We've been focusing really on the materials, making them easier to understand, producing materials that are easier for people to print and share, and making it easier to see what has and hasn't changed, providing simpler information on individual routes, that type of thing. Next slide, please. We have a project website which has a lot of detailed information on it. It has maps. It has a slider map, so you can easily compare the existing network to the proposed network. It has a remix map, which has really detailed information about each of the routes. This is the slider map, but you can kind of scroll back and forth.
This is the existing network, and then you can see how this is the existing network, and you can see how it is changed.
Yep. It also allows you to kind of go through and look at individual lines and see kind of how they stack up. So if you click on, say, like the 2050 Bethany or the 20, you see there's a little blurb about it, and then you can click on the link there and it'll open up a printable PDF, which will go through and show you the map with the routing, and then it'll also show you the proposed schedules.
Existing and proposed, yep.
And then you can also read about different geographic subareas. So if you want to read about the Northeast or any other part of the region, you can. We go into a bit of detail, talk about sort of the general theme of that area and some of the changes sort of on a more of a macro level.
All of the events for the projects are also listed here as well. And somebody asked earlier about if the information would be presented, and I just wanted to, you can come here to the Bus Revolution webinar and you'll see the slides and then also the recording. If you're interested in listening to this later or you want to share it with folks, you do that. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, so we have webinars. Obviously we're talking about the Northeast tonight. Next week we'll be doing the counties, and that'll wrap up the webinar section of the presentations. What else do we have? Next slide, please. The Project Bus has a few more events left. We're at Frankfurt tomorrow, 69th Street Wednesday, and then Olney on Thursday. And then, we've had a bunch of community meetings. We had one at Mayfair Community Center. We had one at the Bustleton Memorial American Legion Post 810. We have a few more scheduled. We have a group of people at St. Joe's tonight. We have Guerin Rec Center tomorrow in South Philly. We are in Kensington on Thursday, Fishtown on Tuesday, West Philly next Wednesday, and then on Thursday we have an event in Derby. But we've had a bunch of different events throughout the region. Hopefully you've been able to make one of them. And then just to kind of make sure people understand kind of where we are in the process, we are sharing an updated draft. We made a lot of revisions based on the fall 2022 engagement. We worked really hard to try to roll in what we thought we could. We used a lot of the feedback, but we also looked at more up-to-date data. We looked at some cell phone data. We really tried to understand kind of how people are moving around, how people could move around in the new system, what we're missing in the current network that we think we can provide good alternatives to. We have another couple weeks of engagement, but our comment period never really closes. And then over the latter part of the spring and then the summer, we'll be wrapping up whatever last engagement we have, and we'll be finalizing the recommended network that we will bring to hearing in September. We'll have several weeks worth of hearings in September. Typically when we have hearings, we have them at 1234 Market Street, which is where our office is. But for this one, we're going to have a few at different locations throughout the region. So we will make sure to post all of that so people can participate. We're also going to make sure that there's a virtual option, because some people won't be able to attend in person. So people will be able to send in feedback, send in comments that will be entered into the official record, and they will be able to provide testimony virtually at the hearing. So we have a busy year planned. After hearings, our goal is to go to the SEPTA board by the end of the year. And in terms of implementation, we would begin the process of implementation next year. we wouldn't be making any changes immediately. We would likely start seeing some service modifications going into place in the summer, with most of the changes that we do decide to ultimately make going in the fall of 2024. So I think that's it. Next slide.
That's it. Yeah.
That's
We can
it.
go right to
So why
Q&A.
don't we go to some Q&A? I saw some interesting questions here. So Aisha, do you wanna kind of let us know what people are thinking?
Sure, we do have a couple questions. The first being, why are you making Route 70 redundant with Route 18 from 5 points?
Well, they're not redundant. I guess there's a little bit of service on Rising Sun. There's the 67-18 service on Rising Sun, and then there's the 18-70 combo on Rising Sun. We're doing this for a couple reasons. We want to provide frequent service along Olney and Rising Sun. In terms of the 70 itself, ridership along the Cottman Avenue portion is very high, and then there's very little ridership on the 70 through the county. So what we're trying to do here is to put together 3 very high ridership corridors, Olney, Rising Sun, and Cottman, to so that we can work with the city on some transit priority projects, and really make this route a higher ridership route. So that's really why we're doing this here. We also have the 1867 combo, which would go from Olney up Rising Sun Avenue. So there is a less frequent route that covers portions of the 67 doing that. So it's a little redundant in some ways, but it does provide, there is demand along a lot of those portions for that much service.
Thank you. The next question is the concern about the possible elimination of the Route 25 and 73. These routes are imperative to people in Pittsburgh or Port Richmond and Fishtown areas, both for residential and working purposes. Is there a fix?
So we're not proposing the elimination of the 25. We're proposing the consolidation of the 73 into the 25. Route 73 is one of the lowest ridership routes in our system. It has alignments that are fairly similar to the 25. It's not exactly the same, but ultimately we think that putting all of the resources into one frequent route is a better use of those resources. But we are not proposing to eliminate service along most of these corridors. Next slide. Next question.
Next question.
Sorry. Habit.
What is being done to address the current driver shortage? If the shortage continues, how will it impact the proposed schedules?
So yeah, we get that question a lot. If you use the system on a regular basis, you've noticed missed trips and that type of thing. We are struggling to retain drivers right now. We are planning this network with the resources that we have available in mind, but obviously the reality of the situation is that attrition is still outpacing hiring. So until we get a handle on that, it's always going to be difficult. But we do think that there are some aspects of this network which make operating a bus potentially a more attractive job. There will be more straight shifts, less swing shifts, that type of thing. So we are optimistic that we are putting some changes in place that can help retain operators, and potentially attract new ones. So, but it's something that we have to be mindful of. But this is a very reality-based project, at least in terms of what our resource allocation plans have been. We've been very clear with the consultants since this project started that we have to be very mindful of how much service we can put out on the street on a given basis. We have to be mindful of the service of the districts that the routes run out of, and we have to be mindful of how many operators that we have on hand.
Thank you. Next one. Is there an update on the proposed direct bus route to the Wissahickon Transit Center?
Yeah, so we are still planning on implementing, we're calling it Direct Bus B, which would connect from Frankfurt Transportation Center down Hunting Park to Wissahickon Transportation Center, a bit like today's Route R. And I believe we are reviewing the designs now for the different stations, and that would go into effect in 2025. So we still have some time before that goes in, but it would provide sort of the connect the Broad Street line up to Frankfurt Transportation Center. They're connected already, but it would be a much faster connection, and it would get people down to Wissahickon faster. And we're also working with the city on other transit priority projects along that corridor as well as on Roosevelt Boulevard.
Are there any considerations for coordinating bus schedules and regional rail schedules for maximizing connections?
So yeah, we since we do have some routes that are already connected to regional rail, and we are proposing some additional ones. That is something that we can look at. These are not super frequent bus routes. They're 30 max bus routes, so that is something that we can look into. The more frequent a bus route is, typically the harder it is to coordinate with a less frequent regional rail schedule, but it's something that we should look into here. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Right. Does 50 no longer connect to Parks Casino?
Can you say that question again?
Does Route 50 will no longer connect to Parks Casino?
So no, so the Route 50 is being consolidated into Route 20. We do have service to Parks via this new Route 542. I'm glad you pulled this up, Bethany. I was going to ask to mention this, which would provide service from City Loop through Philadelphia Mills, up through Parks, through New Chamonix Mall, and then over to Bucks County Tech Park. So we have this is a new route that sort of puts together a bunch of different attractions people are trying to get to. Both in the upper Northeast and in lower Bucks County.
Next one. We need the buses to stop at Convent and Academy and factories inside the Northeast Airport complex for Carroll and PCI and other factories along Drummond Road.
Okay, so thank you. That's a lot of whenever we propose sort of pulling service out of a place or taking it out or reducing it, it's because that ridership is quite low. But we'll make sure that we take a look at the more recent data again to make sure that this makes sense. But the ridership to that area is quite low, which is why we're proposing to take it out.
Are there any express buses left in the Northeast aside from the direct bus on the boulevard?
No, I do see a few other comments regarding express service. I see Faye writing in about the 20 Express. So we'll keep looking at that express model. But right now the only express service being proposed for retention is that direct bus service.
Is Route 1 bus going to be eliminated?
Yes, so we are proposing to eliminate Route 1, coincidental with the implementation of Direct Bus B. We looked really closely at Route 1, but the fact remains that with Route 1, most of the trips people are making are trips that people can make on other routes. There's not a lot of people traveling the full length of Route 1, and it's a long route. It takes up a lot of resources that we can allocate to higher ridership or other services. So that is why we are proposing to eliminate Route 1. There are lots of other alternatives for folks who currently use it, but like I said, most of the trips people make on Route 1, they're making, they could make on another route.
And all the destinations are still served just through different combinations. And in some cases, there may be a transfer, but sure, people can still get on the Boulevard Direct and then transfer to get to Park Casino with the new 542.
Thank you. This looks like the last question as of right now. It's how will losing the pandemic funding / possible fare increase affect the proposed schedules?
Well, I think it'll could certainly have an effect. I think the reality of the situation is that SEPTA is in need of funding. The entire catalyst for this project is ridership, and the fact that we've been losing ridership even before the pandemic. We were losing ridership. If you came and sat in on any of the earlier presentations, I'm sure you heard us talking about that. But the fact of the matter is that SEPTA is very dependent on fare revenue. Transit is not a business. We don't make money, but we are dependent on fare revenue, and bus service, bus ridership is still 40%, 35% below where it was pre-COVID. And even though that's been more resilient than that of other modes, the high-speed services in the regional rail, we need people to come back to the system. In terms of like what the long-term, issues are, we have really great people in our government affairs group that work with, elected officials, helping them understand the importance of transit. But, part of everything we do is about getting people to use the system as much as possible. And, we just have to be, we have to hope that, we're able to secure some additional funding and, get some ridership back onto the system so we don't have to make any tough choices.
We do have a couple more. Are there any new routes being added to connect Olney to Frankfurt?
Yeah.
I just brought this up.
Perfect
Yeah,
timing.
because the Route 8 connected Frankfurt and Olney was one, and that was a frequent bus route that only ran on weekdays. And we have combined, the alignment is a little bit different. The proposed alignment is a little bit different than the 8, but it's very similar. It does connect Frankfurt with Olney. It is a frequent bus route, and it does connect even further beyond to the Cheltenham loop. So we feel like this service is stronger, it's better, it brings people to more places, and it does provide that key function of connecting those two transportation centers.
Will ETA digital technology be used on bus shelters?
So we are looking at ways to introduce some real-time technology to our shelters. We are looking at an e-ink model. They do them in Boston and in Washington, D.C. They're solar powered. It's kind of like the technology that powers your Kindle. And it's a more lightweight option. We would probably roll it out in a few select sites initially, but I think doing anything system-wide, is obviously a long-term project. We don't own the shelters. We don't own the shelters. The city owns the shelters through a partnership with their vendor Intersection. We consult with them on where to place them, but we don't actually own them. So we have to be sensitive to that. But we are looking at ways to introduce some real-time tech to the shelters.
If you're proposing hourly service into Lower Bucks County on Route 58 and one of those trips is missed, what are your customers' choices?
So this is about the hourly service on the Route 58. So we understand, but the reality is the ridership out beyond sort of street road is extremely low on the 58. We had a lot of talks internally about this one, but hourly service to Neshaminy Mall on this route is what the demand dictates. We do not think we can send more service here. There's lots of other service going in the mall. I know it's not on the 58, but the demand for anything more than this on the 58 just does not exist. So, part of what we're trying to do is right size these types of patterns, particularly because it allows us to provide more frequent service, where demand is higher.
For students going to high school and LaSalle at 20th and Olney, this could involve 3 transfers, 24 to 18, and then bus from Olney Transportation Center to high schools. Also 24 buses, less frequent 1-hour service.
So there's a question in there about getting about the Route 18 and how people are going to get to school around sort of Olney Transportation Center, and LaSalle, I think, is right here. So one thing I did want to point out, I've been showing you all the remix map that is available on the Bus Revolution website, so you can go in and click around. And as you've been seeing me do, it's super easy to understand what's happening with the routes. The other thing is you can also turn on some of the school tripper routes. These are bus routes that are designed to bring students directly to high schools. Typically, they only provide 1 or 2 trips a day, once in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. But you can turn this on and see where some of the connections are and how people could get to school. It's not the easiest to use, but it does provide that information. And I do think in a lot of cases, there was a Route 67, I think it was, which was like this giant U-shaped route that brought people into Olney and Broad, where there are some schools, and lots of those trips had patterns or service variants that brought people directly into the high school, those services will be restored. So we won't be making folks make 3 transfers to get to high school or LaSalle.
Okay. This looks like that's it so far.
Okay, a couple things I can show people too on the website. If you go into the remix map, here's where you can, if you go to SEPTA Bus Revolution, it takes you right to this page, and then you can go to the remix map and it will open up. So, and I'll come back to this in a second as this opens up, but you can always click this share your feedback button. It will bring you to this form and you can provide your comments. We take a look at all of the comments, including the comments that you put in the Q&A and that we answer, but just we take a look at all of this. And you can also leave comments that are turned off, I think, but you can leave comments in the remix map as well. And you can see we have quite a few of them, but all of this information, this is all input to the draft network. We used all of this information when we updated the draft network. Of course, we can't answer every single comment, and some people provide different feedback, but this is a way that you can tell us what you like and what you don't like about the network. And you can see people have, we really appreciate it. It's a lot of work for some folks to really sending long, impassioned comments and pleas for things. We do read it, we take a listen to it. And we try to accommodate as many people as possible. So that's another way that you can provide comments on the draft network, is just click this little button here, and then you can add your comment. But you can also use this button here. But typing in your comment or your question in the Q&A also works, because we will be putting this into our database. It's part of our process for analyzing and trying to understand what to do next. I think somebody asked a question about the number 18 not going into the Olney loop.
Which is the Loney loop.
I know, but I think that's what they mean, right? And they both do 1870.
Yeah, there'll be the 18, there's going to be service from Frankfurt along that'll connect through Olney Transportation Center and then pick up the 18 routing west of Olney or west of Broad Street. And then there's the 70, 80, 18 combo that we discussed. No, she's talking about the Fox Chase loop. We call it the Fox Chase loop. Yeah, we are proposing to take the service out of the 18 service out of the Fox Chase loop. I have not heard it called Loney Loop before. I've always called it Fox Chase Loop. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for educating me.
I thought it was just a typo for Olney.
No. It didn't seem like a typo.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, we are proposing to realign the 18 in that sense.
And then there's a question about east-west lines above Cottman are only 30-minute routes. Are any of those routes going to have more frequent service during peak hours? And the answer is yes, some of them will. And one of the ways, many of them, this one's not a good example. Let me see. So the 1970, for example, does have 15-minute service during peak period, and including starting at 2 all the way until 6, as an example. What else do we have for comments? The Loney Loop. There's a question, Dan, did you ask about it just went away. Something about Torresdale Station and.
Yeah, there was the 532.
Oh, you answered that.
Yeah,
written.
through
Okay.
Academy Gardens.
Okay.
All right. So with the last few minutes, I just kind of want to just again highlight where we are in the process. This is the second draft that we've shared. You know what we're going to do now. Once we're done this round of engagement, you know we'll begin reviewing all the feedback we've gotten. So you know we record these chats. We have all your emails. We get all the feedback that we've gotten from the the different events we've had. We get operator input, and we go through and we'll kind of go through the new network lot, section by section, and talk through ways in which we can address the feedback that we've gotten. This is a very iterative process. I think there's already things that I've sort of come to that I've realized in this update that I think we need to kind of take a look at again. I think some people on this call have brought up some good points. So we will look at everything. Doesn't mean the answer is always going to be yes, but we are taking the feedback very seriously. We take this process seriously, and we'll keep working at it, to hopefully develop something that that does work and that people will see the benefit in. There is a question here about, will the SEPTA app provide best route suggestions? We are working with transit. If you use the transit app, it's available on Apple phones or Google phones or Samsung phones, sorry, Galaxy phones. And you'll be able to kind of test this new network versus the existing one, and then that is something that we'll certainly be using through the rest of the process. We do have another round of engagement, in the form of public hearings. Obviously, those are a bit different; they're formal, but we are, excited to get to that point and ultimately, look ahead towards the adoption of a new network. But in the meantime, definitely keep the comments coming in, and feel free to reach out, but what you think really matters. And again, just thank you for all the time you've spent with us over the last couple of years.
And somebody says Plan My Trip is pretty good with mapping tips as well. Yep, mapping trips. Yep. Great. All right. Well, I think if there's no more questions, we could end a little bit early. Is that all right, Dan?
Yep.
All right, so just thank everybody. Just a reminder, the website, septabusrevolution.com. We really appreciate everybody who called in and submitted questions. We really thank you for being here. And we, just thank you and look forward to connecting at another time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.